My name is Sophia Carter, and 5 years ago my life shattered. People think money and comfort protect you from heartbreak, but the deepest scars come from those you trust most. It all began with a wedding invitation from Jessica Whitmore, the woman who left me when I had nothing. She was marrying Mark Harrison, a wealthy tycoon's son. The note said, "I hope we can put the past behind us." I laughed quietly. 5 years ago she chose wealth over me, leaving me heartbroken and alone. Since then I built a life of my own, countless sleepless nights coding, surviving on instant noodles, facing rejection, but eventually my startup exploded, valued over $300 million. Seeing her handwriting again reopened old wounds. I didn't want a simple reunion. I wanted someone who would make her realize what she lost. That morning I saw a woman sitting alone outside a cafe. Messy hair, worn clothes, a small backpack. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, yet cautious. I offered her coffee. She introduced herself as Sophie, and over time, I learned she had studied art and literature, had talent, but misfortune left her on the streets. I asked her to attend Jessica's wedding with me, not as charity, but as someone who would command attention. Hours later, Sophie was transformed. Styled hair, elegant dress, subtle makeup, poised and confident. By the time we reached the wedding, guests were whispering. The wedding venue was Jessica noticed. Her smile faltering. It was a luxury vineyard in Napa Sophie Valley, walked beside me decorated with white roses, captivating golden everyone, lights, and elegant tables filled with wealthy guests. The atmosphere shifted. Cars lined the entrance. The woman while who waiters walked around with champagne now held the spotlight. As Sophie and I stepped out of the car, was only the beginning. I noticed people immediately turning their heads. Sophie looked incredible in the emerald dress. Her confidence had grown during the drive, and now she walked with calm elegance. Guests began whispering quietly. Some assumed she was a celebrity or a model. Others simply stared in curiosity. Then Jessica saw us. For a moment her smile froze. I could see confusion in her eyes. She clearly didn't expect me to come, and she definitely didn't expect me to arrive with someone who would attract so much attention. Mark Harrison stood beside her, greeting guests with a confident smile, but even he looked surprised when Sophie walked past him. Inside the hall, conversations slowly shifted toward us. People introduced themselves to Sophie, asking about her background, complimenting her style and intelligence. Sophie spoke with calm grace, surprising everyone with her thoughtful answers and charming personality. Meanwhile, Jessica tried to maintain control of the evening. She laughed with guests, posed for photos, but I could see the tension building in her face. She kept glancing toward Sophie, watching as more and more people gathered around her. What Jessica didn't know was that the real story of the night had only just begun. As the evening continued, Sophie slowly became the center of attention. Guests surrounded her, curious about the elegant woman who had arrived with such quiet confidence. Some asked if she worked in fashion. Others assumed she was from a wealthy family visiting from Europe. Sophie answered politely but never tried to impress anyone. Her calm personality and natural charm did that on its own. I watched from a distance, sipping my drink, knowing exactly what was happening. Jessica finally couldn't ignore it anymore. She walked toward us with Mark beside her, her smile tight and forced. "Sophia, I didn't expect to see you tonight," she said carefully. I smiled politely. "You sent the invitation." Her eyes then moved to Sophie. "And who is this?" Sophie extended her hand confidently. "Nice to meet you. I'm Sophie." Jessica shook her hand but looked slightly uncomfortable. Mark seemed more interested, studying Sophie with curiosity. Soon another group of guests joined the conversation, asking Sophie questions about art and travel. To everyone's surprise, Sophie spoke intelligently and confidently, telling stories that made people laugh and listen closely. Within minutes the crowd was focused on her again. Jessica's expression changed. This was supposed to be her perfect wedding evening. Yet the attention kept drifting toward someone she had never even heard of before tonight. She forced another smile, but I could see the frustration growing behind her eyes. The balance of the evening was slowly shifting, and Jessica could feel it. Dinner was about to begin when the host announced that a few guests would be invited to share short messages for the couple. It was meant to be a sweet tradition where friends spoke about love and memories. Jessica looked relieved, thinking the attention would finally return to her wedding. But something unexpected happened. One of the guests who had been talking with Sophie earlier raised his hand and said, "Before we start, I think everyone would love to hear a few words from the elegant lady who has completely brightened the evening." Several people agreed immediately. Heads turned toward Sophie. Even the host smiled and offered her the microphone. Jessica's face stiffened, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden idea. Sophie looked surprised and glanced at me. I nodded softly, encouraging her. Slowly she walked to the front of the room. The hall became quiet. Sophie held the microphone for a moment before speaking. Her voice was calm but confident. She spoke about second chances, about how life can take everything from you and still give you the strength to stand again. The room listened closely, completely drawn into her words. Some guests nodded, others looked emotional. Jessica stood frozen beside Mark, realizing that once again the attention had shifted away from her. When Sophie finished, the room filled with applause. For a brief moment it felt like she, not Jessica, was the one everyone had come to see tonight. After the applause faded, Sophie handed the microphone back and calmly returned to our table. Guests continued whispering about her speech. Many people looked impressed, some even emotional. The atmosphere of the wedding had clearly changed. Instead of focusing only on Jessica and Mark, people were now curious about the mysterious woman who had spoken so confidently. Jessica finally walked toward us again, but this time her patience seemed thinner. "You gave quite a speech," she said to Sophie, trying to sound friendly. Sophie smiled politely. "Thank you." Jessica crossed her arms slightly. "So tell me, Sophie, what exactly do you do?" The question sounded simple, but the tone carried a hint of challenge. Sophie paused for a moment, then answered calmly, "Right now I'm rebuilding my life." Some guests nearby became quiet, listening. Sophie continued, her voice steady. She explained that life had once pushed her into very difficult situations. She had lost her job, her home, and many people she trusted. For a while, she had been invisible to the world, just another person struggling to survive. But instead of giving up, she decided to start again, step by step. Her words were honest, not dramatic but powerful. The guests listening seemed even more interested now. Jessica's confident expression slowly faded. She hadn't expected such a sincere answer. And before she could say anything else, Mark suddenly spoke, looking at Sophie with curiosity. "It sounds like you have quite a story," he said. Sophie simply smiled. "Everyone does." The evening slowly moved toward the final part of the wedding celebration. Music played softly while guests continued talking and laughing around the tables. But the attention around Sophie had not disappeared. In fact, even more people had started approaching her, curious about the quiet woman who seemed both humble and incredibly confident at the same time. Jessica watched all of this from across the room. The smile on her face was becoming harder to maintain. Finally, she walked toward me when Sophie stepped away for a moment to get a drink. Jessica looked at me carefully. "So this was your plan?" she asked quietly. I shrugged slightly. "You invited me." She sighed and glanced toward Sophie again. "You've changed, Sophia." I nodded. "Life does that." At that moment Sophie returned, holding a glass of water. Jessica looked at her once more, this time with less arrogance and more curiosity. "You know," Jessica said slowly, "you handled tonight better than most people here." Sophie smiled gently. "Sometimes the people who have lost the most are the ones who learn how to stand the strongest." For a few seconds none of us spoke. Then the music grew louder as the couple prepared for their first dance. Guests moved toward the dance floor, leaving us standing near the table. I looked around the beautiful hall, realizing something important.